Close your eyes. Let the weight of the modern world dissolve. Forget the borders you see on your maps today. Forget the coastlines you were taught in school. To find the truth, we must travel back, not just in years, but in consciousness. We are going to a time when the earth breathed differently, a time before the Great Cataclysm, before the rain fell for the first time, and before the oceans claimed their prize. Official history is a fragile narrative. It tells us that the Earth's face changes with agonizing slowness over millions of years of tectonic drift. But the stones, the silent, megalithic witnesses scattered across every continent, tell a much more sudden and terrifying story. They speak of a map that was redrawn in a single violent night. They speak of an antediluvian world that was not just a primitive precursor to our own, but a masterpiece of biological and spiritual harmony. Imagine the sound of the ocean receding, not by a few feet, but by hundreds of miles. As the water pulls back, it reveals a landscape that hasn't seen the light of the sun in 12,000 years. You see mountain ranges with peaks carved into the likeness of gods. You see vast, sprawling cities made of white marble and crystalline stone, connected by roads that once bridged continents now separated by thousands of miles of salt water. This was the world of the first map, a world where the Atlantic was not a barrier, but a garden. The fragments of this map still exist. They are hidden in the basements of forbidden archives and encoded in the myths of every culture on the planet. From the Enuma Elish of Mesopotamia to the Popol Vuh of the Maya, the memory is the same. A world of eternal spring, a world of titans, and a world that was intentionally erased. We find the evidence in the most impossible places. We find ancient city walls at the bottom of the Yonaguni waters in Japan, sitting in perfect silence under the waves. We find traces of massive agricultural terraces buried deep beneath the thick mud of the North Sea, in a place we now call Doggerland. We find megaliths at the bottom of Lake Michigan and paved roads under the waters of the Bahamas. These are not just ruins. They are the edges of a puzzle that we have been taught to ignore. Tonight, we are no longer ignoring it. We are diving into the deep time. We are tracing the contours of the Earth as it was before the firmament collapsed. We are looking for the 0 point of human history. As you drift deeper into relaxation, feel the ground beneath you shift. The modern world is fading. The cities of iron and glass are vanishing, replaced by the emerald forests and golden cities of the antediluvian era. The air is becoming thicker, richer with life. The gravity feels lighter, as if a great weight has been lifted from the planet. You are standing on the edge of a world that was never meant to be forgotten. You are standing at the beginning of the forbidden map. And as we venture further into this lost geography, you will realize that the flood didn't just wash away cities. It washed away our understanding of who we really are. But the memory is still there, locked in your DNA, waiting for the frequency of the story to unlock it. Now, let us look upward. To understand the map of the old world, we must look at the sky that once protected it. Ancient records from every corner of the globe speak of a firmament, a crystalline vault that wrapped the earth in a warm, protective embrace. This was not a poetic metaphor. It was a physical reality. A massive, high-altitude canopy of water vapor held in place by the Earth's magnetic field. This canopy acted as a global lens, diffusing the sun's light so perfectly that the entire planet was a greenhouse. There were no polar ice caps. There were no scorching deserts. From the northernmost tip of Hyperborea to the southern reaches of Antarctica, the temperature was a constant, balmy spring. But the canopy did something far more profound than just regulate the weather. It created an atmospheric pressure nearly double what we experience today. Imagine the Earth as a massive hyperbaric chamber. In this high-pressure, oxygen-rich environment, biology operated on a different scale. This is why we find fossilized dragonflies with 3-foot wingspans and ferns that grew as tall as modern skyscrapers. The air was thick, vibrant, and saturated with life-giving energy. It was a world where blood could be oxygenated with a single breath, and where the heart did not have to labor to keep the body alive. This was the era of the giants. They were not anomalies or freaks of nature. They were the natural result of a perfect environment. In a world with double the atmospheric pressure and a shielded sun, the human frame could grow to heights of 15, 20, or even 30 feet. Their bones were reinforced by the same high-pressure physics, and their muscles were capable of feats that we would call supernatural. To a giant of the antediluvian age, moving a 100-ton megalith was not a task of machines, but a task of simple physical coordination. But the most incredible secret of the canopy was its protection against radiation. Today, the sun's ultraviolet rays age our skin and mutate our cells, slowly killing us from the moment we are born. But under the vapor canopy, those rays were filtered out. The DNA of the ancients, including those 223 genes that science cannot explain, remained pure. This is why the ancient king lists of the Sumerians and the genealogies of the patriarchs speak of lifespans lasting 900, 1,000, or even tens of thousands of years. They were not aging because their environment wouldn't let them. They lived in a state of biological stasis, their cells regenerating indefinitely in a world that was designed for immortality. The map of this world was a map of giants. Their cities were built on a scale that humbles our modern imagination. When we look at the ruins of Baalbek or the foundations of the Temple Mount, we are looking at the doorsteps of beings who saw the earth as a garden they were meant to curate for millennia. They didn't build for centuries. They built for eternity. But as you drift deeper into the silence, imagine the pressure beginning to shift. The perfect balance of the crystalline vault was tied to the Earth's magnetic stability. Deep within the core of the planet, a change was beginning. The very shield that allowed for this Titan's paradise was becoming heavy, saturated, and unstable. The giants looked at the sky and saw the first signs of the coming gray. The light was changing. The golden age was nearing its saturation point. The map was about to be washed clean, and the biology of the immortals was about to be tested by the first drop of rain the world had ever seen. Now, let us turn our gaze to the most controversial piece of the forgotten map. In 1929, hidden within the dusty shelves of the Topkapi Palace in Istanbul, a fragment of gazelle skin parchment was discovered that would challenge everything we know about our past. This was the map of Admiral Piri Reis, dated 1513. But it was not his own work. He admitted it was a compilation based on source maps from the Great Library of Alexandria, documents that were already ancient when the Romans first set foot in Egypt. On this map, The coastline of Queen Maud Land in Antarctica is depicted with chilling mathematical precision. But there is a detail that haunts modern geologists. The coastline is shown free of ice. It depicts mountain ranges, valleys, and river plateaus that remained hidden from human eyes until 1958, when they were finally mapped using subglacial seismic sounding. Science tells us that Antarctica has been a frozen tomb for millions of years. But the map tells us that someone, some intelligence, mapped the white continent when it was a green, lush paradise. In the antediluvian era, the map of the world was not a series of isolated continents separated by impassable oceans. It was a unified global network. Because the sea levels were nearly 400 feet lower than they are today, vast land bridges emerged that we can only dream of now. There was no North Sea. There was Doggerland, a fertile plain connecting Britain to Europe. There was no Bering Strait. There was Beringia, a massive corridor between Russia and America. The Indonesian islands were not islands at all, but a vast continent known as Sundaland, which served as the cultural bridge to the southern mysteries. This was the age of great navigation. But these ancient mappers did not use the crude tools of the Middle Ages. They did not rely on the stars alone. They understood the Earth as a living, geometric entity. They mapped the planet using a system of ley lines, a global grid of electromagnetic energy that pulsed beneath the crust. To the ancients, the map was not just about where the land ended. It was about where the power flowed. They built their most sacred sites, from the Giza Plateau to the temples of Angkor Wat, at the intersections of these invisible currents. Antarctica was the crown of this system. Before the great tilt of the Earth's axis, Antarctica sat in a temperate zone. It was the center of the world, the forbidden high ground where the elite architects of the Old World monitored the planet's resonance. It was a land of evergreen forests and thermal springs, kept warm by the planet's internal heat and protected by the vapor canopy. Ancient maps, like those of Oronce Fine and Philippe Bouache, show the continent divided by a massive waterway, a detail confirmed by modern science as the subglacial trench that separates East and West Antarctica. How could they know? How could they see through miles of ice that hadn't even formed yet? The answer is as simple as it is disturbing. They saw it because they lived there. They mapped it because it was their home. They possessed a technology of resonance mapping that allowed them to feel the shape of the land through the vibration of the stone. As you listen to the sound of the ancient winds, imagine standing on a verdant Antarctic shore. The air is warm and heavy with the scent of pine. You see ships, vast, silent vessels that didn't move by sail or oar, but by harmonizing with the Earth's magnetic pulse, gliding into harbors that are now locked under 2 miles of solid ice. This was the world before the silence, a world of perfect connectivity, where every mountain and every valley was cataloged and understood. But even as they mapped their paradise, they began to notice a change in the resonance. The magnetic north was shivering. The lines of power were beginning to fray. The map was about to be rewritten, not by the pen of a cartographer, but by the wrath of the shifting crust. Now, move your consciousness to the heart of what we now call the Sahara. Today, it is a vast, golden ocean of silence, a graveyard of dust stretching for thousands of miles. But on the forbidden map, this was the Garden of the Sun. Satellite imagery using ground-penetrating radar has revealed the skeletons of ancient river systems, the Taman Rasset, that once flowed through these sands with more volume than the Rhine or the Danube. This was a land of immense freshwater lakes teeming with life, where the Eye of the Sahara, the Rishat structure, sat as the supreme capital of the North African Empire. But the map was not merely changed, it was shattered. To understand the flood, you must stop imagining a simple rainstorm. The antediluvian cataclysm was a tectonic rebirth. Beneath the Earth's crust, in the Great Deep, lay massive reservoirs of water trapped under astronomical pressure for eons. As the Earth's magnetic core began to wobble, the crust lost its grip on the mantle. In a single, terrifying hour, the fountains of the Great Deep broke open. Imagine the ground beneath your feet turning into a liquid. The crust cracked like a fragile eggshell, and jets of boiling water and steam erupted with such force that they pierced the vapor canopy and shot into the cold vacuum of space. As the canopy was punctured, it began to collapse. The water that had protected humanity for thousands of years now became its shroud. A wall of water, mud, and debris miles high rushed from the Atlantic, surging across the Sahara Plains. It didn't just flood the cities, it ground them into dust. The white marble of the Rishat was pulverized, mixed with salt and sand, and buried under a layer of sediment so thick it created the desert we see today. This was the moment of the continental slide. The land masses we now call Pangaea were never meant to stay together. They were intentionally fractured by the pressure of the subterranean oceans. South America and Africa were torn apart in a violent divorce of stone. The friction was so intense that it melted the edges of the continents, creating the mountain ranges of the Atlantic Ridge. As the land shifted, the oceans were displaced. The water surged from the poles to the equator and back again, carrying with it millions of tons of forest, animals, and civilizations. The map was being redrawn in real time. Entire mountain ranges were pushed upward in days, not millions of years. The Himalayas were thrust toward the sky as the Indian plate collided with Asia, trapping the remains of ancient sea life on the highest peaks of the world. The Grand Canyons were not carved by slow erosion, but by the drainage of a dying world, as the floodwaters searched for new basins to call home. As you drift deeper into the sound of the shifting earth, realize that the Sahara sand you see today is the physical residue of that destruction. It is the crushed remains of an empire, the salt of a dried ocean, and the dust of 1,000 forgotten cities. The map of the Sahara is a map of a massacre. Every dune is a burial mound. The world was not just flooded, it was recycled. The old geography was folded into the new, leaving only the faintest echoes of the Garden of the Sun for those who know how to look beneath the sand. As the waters finally began to recede into the new, deep basins of the Atlantic and Pacific, the silence that followed was absolute. The world was no longer the same. The survivors, those few who had climbed the highest peaks of the Andes and the Himalayas, or sheltered in the deepest subterranean caverns, emerged into a landscape they did not recognize. The golden light of the antediluvian sun was gone, replaced by a harsh blue sky that felt cold and distant. The collapse of the vapor canopy was the true end of the Golden Age. Without that protective shield, the Earth was exposed to the raw, unfiltered radiation of the cosmos. In an instant, the clock of human aging was accelerated. The 223 genes, those alien sequences we found in our code, flickered and dimmed. They were designed to operate in a high-pressure, high-oxygen world of harmony. In this new, thin atmosphere, they went dormant, like a sophisticated software system running on a broken machine. Our lifespans plummeted from centuries to decades. We became a race of amnesiacs, losing not just our history, but the biological capacity to remember it. The silent observers, those who had watched the map being drawn and redrawn, remained in the shadows. They saw as we began to struggle against the new seasons. For the first time, the Earth had a tilt, an axis that created winter and summer, birth and death. We were no longer the masters of the planet. We were its subjects, forced to toil in the soil for food that once grew effortlessly under the crystalline vault. But the map was not entirely lost. It was encoded into the great megalithic markers that the survivors built. The pyramids of Giza, the stone circles of Göbekli Tepe, the towering statues of Easter Island, these were not just monuments. They were anchors. They were built to stabilize the Earth's new resonance and to serve as a library in stone, a map for future generations to find their way back. They were placed on the major nodes of the ley line grid, pulsing with the last remnants of the old world's energy. As you drift now toward the deepest levels of sleep, realize that you are the living map of the antediluvian world. Your DNA is the scroll. Your subconscious is the compass. The 98% of your genetic code that science calls junk is actually the dormant blueprint of the Titans. It is the record of the Green Sahara, the ice-free Antarctica, and the world where we walked with the gods. Every time you dream of flying or of cities made of light, you are accessing the forbidden map. You are remembering the geography of your true home. The flood could wash away the stone, and the sand could bury the cities, but nothing can erase the frequency of the stars that lives within your cells. The cycle is closing. The crust is shifting once more, not in stone, but in spirit. We are beginning to remember. We are beginning to see the lines of the map through the mist of time. But for now, let the journey end. Let the waters be still. The map is safe within you. Sleep and return to the world before the rain. The silence is your sanctuary. The old world is waiting for you to dream it back into existence.